And now I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Keys to Career Advancement, with our presenter, Gary O'Neill. Gary, you now have the floor.
Thanks, Mayan. Hello, everyone. My name is Gary O'Neill, and I'm here to talk to you about keys to career advancement. Just a little bit about me before we dive straight into the class, so you kind of know the perspective that I come from, is that I've been an entrepreneur, a hiring manager. I've probably hired 300 people for the last, long time. I've been running recruiting teams for companies large and small. So I've seen a lot of people, a lot of hires, a lot of successes in business, and those people who have been wildly successful and advanced their career, and others not quite as much. And so I'm here to kind of share with you all the things that I can about the keys to career advancement to move your career forward. So without further ado, let's jump into that. So our objectives here today are really pretty simple, which is to, again, share with you as much as I possibly can about the things that you can do and take control of to advance your career and have success in your career, whatever that means to you. I mean, it's different for everyone. Sometimes success for some people is about promotions, others it's about income, others it's about having a certain lifestyle and something to do with their family needs. So whatever your objectives are, we still want, what we're going to talk about is the keys to advancing your career and getting to the place where you really want to be, and will help you feel successful in your career. The specific topics we're going to go over are these. The people who I've seen, and I've been first or second person to about 15,000 hires at this point in time, and have seen a lot of people who are really successful in achieving their goals and people who are less successful in achieving their goals. And one of the things that's really clear, it's kind of cliche, but those people who actually set career goals and have clear career goals, and particularly those who wrote down some of their career goals, tend to be the people who are more successful in advancing their career in the way that they want. Now, which comes first? You know, I don't necessarily believe that it's the literal writing of them down that is the secret, but it's about having them and being clear what it is you're trying to achieve. Because the truth is, if you're clear about that and you communicate that to other people, they'll help you. And furthermore, when it comes time to make a career change or make some kind of decision, as opposed to being at the effect of the job market and what's going on in your business, you can take a lot more control if you know what your career goals are. So we're going to talk a little bit about a simple way to set some career goals that will help you navigate your career and advance your career. We're going to talk about this notion of a professional mindset. And what I mean by that is that some of the people who I've worked with, one extreme is that, everything that they're doing is about the success of their company, and they're so engaged and so committed to the success of their company that that's kind of what they're about. Other people, they're often called paycheck employees in the recruiting world, kind of have this notion, well, I'm there to show up and get a paycheck, and it's kind of more about them. What I can share with you is that your ability to have a professional mindset, to know that the work that you're doing needs to matter to the company, and that you're there to support other people in their success, is clearly a key with regard to career advancement. So we'll talk some about that. Another part of career advancement is that there come times in all of our career when it might make sense to change jobs. And landing with the right company, the right team, can make a significant difference. There's no single thing that can make a bigger difference in advancing your career than running an effective job search, so that rather than, again, just being reactive to the jobs that might be posted or what's going on in the marketplace, that you can navigate toward, work toward, and execute an effective job search to land a role with a team and a company that'll help you achieve your goals, as opposed to one who just, will hire you. We'll talk about then, when you start a new role, how to manage your career inside of an organization. And it's a really simple approach. It really doesn't take much time, but I call it 90-day sprints. What are we going to do in terms of our plans against our career goals in these 90-day sprints? And again, the people who I know who really kind of focus on this and work it on, these 90-day increments, tend to be the ones who achieve the goals that they set for themselves. And then finally, we'll talk about career navigation. What I mean by that is, how do you make a decision sometimes when it's time to change careers, when it's time to change employers, when it's time to make a move laterally inside of your company. Whatever it is, we'll talk about the options that you have and how to go about making the decision when something needs to change, and how to go about that. So without further ado, let's just jump into it. I run with my interrupts enabled, so please put some questions and stuff in there. I'll stop periodically, catch up on some of your questions, and oh, there we go.
There you go. I was going to say, I think that we were
As
on a
soon as I
slide
heard you
there.
come on, I knew that I hadn't started that again. All right, so we hadn't missed much. Here, I'll show you what you missed. You saw the introduction slide. We had one slide that says objective, and then we had this one. All right. So let's start by talking about setting career goals. And, I've done a lot of research on this, and a lot of the planning tools that people have, are a little bit cumbersome. But I want to share with you just a few ideas that I think will really, is a really simple way to go about setting clear career goals. And the big deal here is that if you set goals and you know what it is you're trying to achieve, then you can work toward those as opposed to just kind of going with the flow of everything that's going on. Not that you'd want to fight against the flow, right? But how do you take advantage of the flow, and what do you do to move your career forward? And it really all starts with this notion of setting career goals. So when you have clear career goals, it's really going to help you in a number of different ways. One is that it will really help you run an effective job search. And what I mean by that is that hiring managers and people who conduct interviews, because I see that happen all the time, I'm around interviewing happening all the time, is that those people who have really clear goals about what they're trying to achieve in their job and their career are simply more attractive. They're more interesting. They're more engaging. And so imagine if you're a hiring manager and you have a group of people who their career goals are kind of like, well, I could do this or I could do that. I'm pretty much open to all kinds of things. And then there's another group of people who are really crystal clear. This is who I am. This is what I do. This is what I'm trying to achieve. In almost every case, those people who are a lot more clear about what it is they're trying to achieve and their goals around the role that they're interviewing for and how that will help them in their career are the ones who get selected to be hired. It just works out so well. So having clear career goals can really help you during your job search. It certainly helps in the interview, which is what we were just talking about. It can also help you with your job search with regard to the types of companies that are most likely to be able to be a place where you can achieve your career goals. It can help you negotiate and select which of multiple job offers, because the goal when you go to a market to land a new opportunity isn't to get one job offer, it's to get multiple job offers. Most people don't, but a lot of people do. So if you execute an effective job search, there is a way to go to market and sometimes get multiple job offers, and having clear career goals can sometimes really help you select from multiple job offers. It can help you with your career direction and deciding also whether or not it's time to change jobs or career. So let's talk about how to do this. I think it's fairly straightforward, and it doesn't have to take all that much time. These are just a few common goal types or areas where I see people setting goals. So you might want to just look over this list sometime, take a piece of paper and figure out in which of these areas maybe you have some goals that really matter to you. It might be about family needs, to be able to pick up kids from school or to take care of parents or whatever it is that's related to your overall family needs and your overall family goals, because those can definitely overlap with your career. So that's an area to explore. Another area where it's often a great idea to consider some of your career goals is, what are your learning objectives? What are the things that you know now? What are the things that you really want to know in the future? That also matters, because if you have particular goals about the types of roles that you really want to be in, most types of roles have a requirement, if you will, for you to have certain skills and expertise and ability to do things. So if you have a goal to become a certain thing, a network engineer, or a senior network manager, or whatever it is that is in your career path, there are things that you'll need to learn. So at any given time, you probably ought to be considering, what are the things that I next need to learn to help me achieve my career objectives? You may have goals around the growth of the organization or the size of the organization. I really want to work for a much smaller organization than I currently do because I want to make a greater impact those are things that you might want to consider as well. The culture of the organization. Some people fit really well in go, 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 go get them, kind of aggressive type of environments where it's all about action oriented. Other people are going to fit a lot better in a culture and environment that, everyone's got different things. So you may want to think about the type of environment or the type of culture of the people who, you'll most thrive with. You'll have financial goals. You can have location goals. Where do I want to live? Sometimes you want to relocate, and that's an important part of your personal goals as well as it overlaps with your career goals. What schedule do you want, or what's the mission and the purpose of the organization? I just list these as a starting point for you to sit down sometime and kind of go through these, think it through, and I suggest that you literally pick 3, 4, 5 of these that matter to you most. And then you can take those and be more specific about what it is you want to achieve in each of those areas. It doesn't have to be a big, long exercise, and it's iterative. It's, it's not cast in stone. You can change it at any time, but getting clear on these types of things can be really useful. The other thing that I find very useful, because you're going to use these career goals to communicate with other people, because if you enlist other people in helping you achieve your career goals, things will really go much better. People will line up behind people who are clear about what it is they want to do and help them achieve those goals. And it's best when you do that if you can take your goals and kind of split them into timelines. I think about it kind of in 3 pieces, which is what's happening immediately. What's the next step that you want to achieve? It might be, landing a new job. And your immediate goals may be things like be able to pay my rent if you're in a situation like that, which sometimes people are. But the point is, what's your immediate goals? What are the things that are right in front of you in the next 90 days, 6 months, something like that, that you really want to achieve next? Then you probably want to put in place some midterm goals. These are probably annual type goals in length. What do you want to achieve in the next year? What do you want to achieve in this period? And these are often really great goals to set and have discussions with your supervisor, your team, whoever it is that you're working at work. And then you can have long-term goals, which is, this is where I'm going in my career. This is what I want. And all of those goals, my suggestion is that you think of most of them. If you pick a few of these that really matter to you, then take those areas and what you want to achieve and kind of define them in terms of immediate next steps that you're going to take, actions that you can take, kind of this next horizon of about a year from now, where am I going with this? Because you'll be able to evaluate, given your current situation, whether that's realistic. And then you can have long-term goals that, may seem unrealistic today, but we can put in place stepping stones to get there. So if you set goals in those areas and really look at it and divide it over time, again, I'm not looking for this big, long, multi-hour exercise. This is something that in a first pass, you could probably do in, a thoughtful 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour at the outside, and get really clear on what it is that you're trying to achieve. So, these are things that you have to decide, or that you can decide, and you can actually have a considerable amount of control over and influence over your career going forward. I see a lot of people who are, again, kind of at this notion, kind of at the effect of what's going on, or some expectation that their company is going to do something, or HR ought to help them with planning, or all kinds of other reasons. But it's really up to you to decide, what are the jobs that are going to help you achieve your goals is the way to kind of go to market about it. What are the teams, and where are the companies? And if I have these goals and it's important to me, what are the jobs that are going to help you achieve your goals? Because you decide that, and I suggest that you don't leave it up to others. I see sometimes people, particularly in job search, where they're going to market and with this idea of, well, I'm open to lots of things. And what happens when you're too open to too many things, then you're not clear to other people. And you're essentially leaving it up to them to decide the best way to work with you and to leverage your skills and your talents. And the other people don't have enough insight into you to be able to really ascertain that. So if you're in the mode of career search ever, and you find yourself in this notion of, well, I'm open to lots of things, it could be in sales or operations, my suggestion to you is you get a lot more clear about that. You pick a direction, and you find a direction that's in alignment with what your goals are. So if you put in place really clear career goals for yourself, pardon me, then it's a whole lot easier to decide the types of roles and the types of companies and the types of teams that make sense for you. And then you can go after that, because people literally are attracted to clarity. Again, like I said, put yourself in the shoes of the hiring manager, and you have a group of people who are not real clear about what they're trying to achieve and the type of work that really matters to them. And then you have a set of people who are very clear about what it is that they want to do. And those who are very clear that they want to achieve the kinds of goals that you need someone to achieve in the role become a lot more interesting, a lot more valuable. And those are the people who are most likely to get hired, which is kind of the first step in advancing your career if you're looking to change jobs and get into the right kind of company. So being open to lots of things, I think, kind of reduces that opportunity. And by putting in place some really clear goals around what it is you're trying to achieve with regard to your career, it can really help you narrow it down, because it's really up to you to decide what's going to happen with your career. A great question to ask yourself is, would you accept a job that doesn't meet your goals? And what I find, I run recruiting teams today, and I find that some people who are, looking for a job or who are interviewing through things aren't very clear on what their career goals are. And that means that an offer will come and the money looks okay. And yeah, I guess it's okay. Sure, I'll accept that job. And they end up in a situation where it's really not the place where they really want to be, and things don't necessarily work out so well. And if you peel it back, what it comes down to sometimes is because they weren't really clear on what their goals were, they accepted jobs that kind of just didn't make sense. So if you have clear career goals, then the question is, would you accept a job that doesn't meet your goal? And the answer probably ought to be no. Now, if the immediate goal is to be able to pay your bills, then that might be your one goal. And so if you accept that job, then maybe it does meet your goals. But my point is that if you're clear on what it is you're trying to achieve, then you can better answer this question about, would you accept a job that doesn't meet your goal? I work with people pretty frequently as well who go through an interview process and discover along the way that that company or that team isn't what's going to help them move their career forward, and they'll withdraw themselves out of consideration. So career goals can really help you with this really big decision. All right. So yeah, I hope that that makes some sense to you guys. I mean, what I'm really saying is that the first key in advancing your career is truly to have a set of clear goals about what advancement even means. It's hard to measure that you've advanced in your career if you don't have well-defined goals. Now, it does turn out that for some people, they don't have clear career goals, but they're great at what they do. They're dedicated to their team. They make things happen, and they move forward in their career no matter what. So there are clearly people who advance in their career who haven't really given a whole lot of thought to their specific goals. So that happens. But I would say that, the majority of the time, the people who I see who are really advancing in their careers do take the time out to really set some clear goals, and then they can know that, whether or not they're achieving what their goals really are. So since we're at a little transition, we're going to talk about professional mindset. Just take a quick pause and see if there's anything that we need to address, or questions or comments or anything like that.
No, you're doing such a great job. We don't have any questions just yet, so maybe we can move on.
Okay, great. So the other thing that I see that's just recently, I was talking to a candidate who is looking to make a move in a new job. And one of the things that he shared with me was that he had always, I think he was always a hard worker. I think that he was always focused on getting his job done. But what he shared with me is that he finally figured out that sitting in his cube and just, putting his heads down and just checking off all of the lists that was on his item, on his to-do list, made him a good employee. But he saw other people around him who were advancing in their careers who he didn't necessarily believe were doing as much or weren't necessarily as good at their job as he was. And, kind of came to this conclusion that there must be more to it than that. And I'm here to share with you, and you probably already know this, but if everyone knew this, maybe they would behave differently at work. which is having a professional mindset and being part of the team and pulling on the rope really hard and trying to understand how your role fits into things and make sure that instead of just being isolated in your one little area focused on your tasks, that it's really about creating this professional mindset of achievement and helping the company and others achieve their goals. So we put together this little pyramid that we call the employer hierarchy of need. And the idea here is that, you know, as you move from the bottom of the pyramid toward the top of the pyramid, then that's moving more and more and more toward a professional mindset. So, you know, being positive, helpful, and friendly, can-do attitude, you know, strong work ethic, those things are really important with regard to success in your career. So let's kind of walk through this a little piece at a time. You know, it's interesting that I wouldn't think that we would even have to address this bottom item. With most of you, we probably wouldn't, but some of you have worked with people who didn't necessarily exhibit this, which is to be dependable, to be trustworthy, to be respectful, to show up on time, to be there, to pull on the rope, to do your work, to stay focused, to find valuable things to do when no one's given you anything to do. Those are baseline expectations, right? No one, or let's just say that if the best you do is say, well, you know, I show up on time, I do my work, you know, okay, that's baseline expectation. That's what you get paid to do. And there's really nothing about performing at that level that would make you expect that you'll advance in your career. At this next level, which is about your work ethic, about your skills and your tasks, again, this is kind of the level of what's basic expectation of you doing your job. You know, strong work ethic means that during the time that you're working, you're focused on getting work done. You're not on social media, you're not on your phone, you're not distracted with other kinds of things, and you stay focused on what it is that you're supposed to do. You hone your skills, your ability to do your work gets better and better, you get your tasks done, and that will certainly make you a good employee. And there are a lot of really good employees who, you know, like the gentleman who I was talking about earlier, who kind of get overlooked. All right, they kind of get overlooked because if you're there and you're doing good and everything's great and you don't seem to need anything, then your manager's like, wow, okay, that's awesome, great. But they'll be happy with you staying right where you're at in the place that you're at because they don't necessarily know that you may want to achieve more. So, you know, having a strong work ethic, being good at what you do, and getting all of your work done is, you know, basic expectations of being good at what you do. But it might not be enough to really advance your career in the way that you would want to. So this next step, I call it indispensable. And the reason why I call it indispensable is that, you know, an example is that people will sometimes avoid, if they're, you know, between jobs, they'll avoid contract opportunities because, you know, they're going to come to an end. But just using this as an example, I see people all the time who go into a contract role and they then go direct, they get employed, they get hired, even though it was supposed to be a 3-month contract and come to an end. And the reason why that happens is not because they had a strong work ethic and the ability to work in the skills, but because they became indispensable. And when it was time, and again, I'm just using this as an example, when it was time for the contract to come to end, all of the other people on contract may have been let go, but people fought for, made a case for, and went out of their way for the people who became indispensable. And what it takes to become indispensable is that you're focused on results, not just tasks. You know, at any given time, there are things that you're responsible for doing, you know, activities and tasks that you're responsible for doing. That isn't the reason why your company needs you there. It's the result of those tasks. What is it? You know, let's just say that you're on an IT support desk, you're doing end user support. Well, what is it about doing end user support that really matters to your company? Well, it's about keeping people productive. It's about ensuring that other people can get their work done. It's about protecting company assets. So those tasks you perform as an IT administrator or someone on the help desk, or if you're in medical building and coding, it's not about getting the code right. If you're in medical building and coding, it's about ensuring that insurance pays on time, that your patients have a great experience. So becoming indispensable kind of starts with this idea of understanding what your role is and how that impacts other people, and ultimately how that impacts the business. Another aspect of becoming indispensable is that, as opposed to the individual I was talking about who stayed more or less, and I'm being, metaphorical, but pretty much stayed in their cube and pretty much just did their tasks, that's great. But what also makes people indispensable is their focus on teamwork, on helping others be successful. Because if it comes time when a decision is being made about advancement or promotions or moves to another team, or whether or not you get to stay and everybody else on contract is going, has a lot to do with, do other people really value you being there? Because if you would become indispensable and the time might come to make one of those choices, other people will come to bat for you. So becoming indispensable is really all about focusing on the results that you achieve through and for other people. And that's one of the real keys to advancing your career. And it's certainly the first step in terms of what I call really a professional mindset. I mean, it's arguable that this is a professional mindset. I mean, it's everyone who is a true professional certainly has a strong work ethic. They're certainly good or skilled at what they do, and they get all their tasks done. But I'm not sure that that's enough. This is kind of the dividing line right here, is when somebody begins to work on that. And then really advancement is to the degree that you have some attention on strategy and leadership. And I don't necessarily mean as a more senior role in the company. I mean, I work with a company that has a warehouse, and they have about 20 people who work in their warehouse. And there are some people on their team that show leadership. They're a warehouse worker, but they show leadership by showing up on time, to always being at the meetings, to really caring about not just the fact that they're loading boxes onto trucks, but they really care about their company, and they know how many units their company is selling, and they're part of what's going on, as opposed to just a person who's in the warehouse. So your ability to kind of really care about this bigger picture and to provide leadership to your peers, and sometimes leadership is as little as having a really great attitude and being there and making it matter. Those are the kinds of things that really set you up for significant opportunities for advancement. So, again, this is what we kind of refer to as the employer hierarchy of needs. They need you to show up. They need you to work hard. Now we need you to focus on business results and understanding how you make an impact in supporting others. And then finally, we look for you for cultural and attitude leadership, for being part of the strategy. The strategy might be how to help your warehouse team, look at goals even. Might be how many boxes per hour are you able to load? How can you make things more efficient? Those kinds of things. At a warehouse level, that is strategy, right? It isn't necessarily company strategy, but at all levels, you can work on strategy. So kind of what it comes down to, and again, what we're talking about is keys to career advancement. So if you really want to be one of those people who's advancing in their career, and advancing in their career means achieving your goals, which we talked about setting. So you set the goals and then you have to go about achieving those goals. An absolute key to that is to care about business success. It's not just about a job. It's that if you can kind of get larger than that and understand why you're there and what it is you're really trying to achieve, why does your company need you there? Your company never needs you there for the tasks you perform. They need you there for the results that doing your task performs. So, that's why this first bullet point says, understand the ripple effect. How does what you do impact others? What difference does it make if you do your job really well or if you do your job really poorly? So that is what we mean by the ripple effect. And if you have focus on that, there may be no single thing that will make a bigger difference in your ability to advance your career than to really understand how you fit into the business. And I see too few people who understand that. Let me give you an example. I was working with an individual, it's quite a while back, but it's a great example, who wrote technical documentation. And I was talking to this individual about the impact of their work, what they understood about the impact of the work that they have on the business. And he's like, well, I don't know. I mean, I write technical documentation. I was like, okay, well, tell me about one of your, more recent significant projects that you're proud of. And I'll shorten the story, but we went through this story where this individual had written the documentation and did the work to ensure that the documentation could actually be on the network devices. These were routers and switches that were out in the field for cellular networks. And he made it so that those documents were on the devices themselves. I was asking about, why is that so important and what difference did that make to your business? And what we found out was that the service that they have so many different variations of, these devices that are out in the field and different levels of software, and they didn't always know ahead of time exactly what was going to be there. And so if the technicians didn't have the documentation in their vehicle when they went out to these sites, and some of them are reasonably remote from where their work location is, then they couldn't fix whatever they were out there to do or tune whatever it was that they were out there to do. So by putting the documentation on the devices, it enabled that that happen less frequently. So we started talking about how much time that saved, and it turned out that it saved, their teams maybe as much as 4 hours per week. And then when you started looking at the cost of those people and how many there were, it turned out that that activity had probably turned into saving the company several $1 million a year. So we went from this notion of somebody having no idea of what their impact was on business success to this individual going, wow, okay, you're right. I guess it really did make that kind of an impact. And that's what I mean about in terms of being able to advance your career, is to the degree that you can understand the impact that you have on the business. That's a big part of the communication around advancing your career. So it's pretty easy. I mean, it starts with, who do you help? What difference do you make in the lives of customers and fellow employees and the different teams that you support? How does that ultimately impact the customer? If you can take it that far, if you're on an IT support desk and you're helping users in the companies, how does that ultimately impact the customer? And really see if you can't figure out exactly how it helps the company make money. Sometimes it's a little bit removed, but again, like if you were in medical billing and coding, how does your work help the company make money? I mean, if you do it correctly, you get better patients, insurance pays faster, money flows more easily. It's really clear. So in most roles, you can at least have some idea of how you help the company make money. And making money is the same thing as saving money and saving time and increasing quality. All of those things matter. So a key to career advancement really is to care about business success. So it kind of comes down, what we've been talking about, it kind of comes down to this, which is having the mindset of a professional, not just an employee. I'm not just here to do tasks. I'm here to be a team player. I'm here to make a difference. I'm here to be indispensable and irreplaceable. Now, none of us are, right? None of us are indispensable and none of us are irreplaceable in our roles. But the more you work it like that, the closer you become. It's not like indispensable and irreplaceable or on-off switch. It's really a matter of degrees. And your attitude and your approach and your work ethic and your results orientation and your teamwork and your strategy and your leadership are all of the things that really contribute to you being indispensable and irreplaceable, because indispensable and irreplaceable is a decision made by other people. You don't choose to be indispensable or irreplaceable. Indispensable or irreplaceable means that other people have decided that you're indispensable and that you're irreplaceable, and they'll go to bat for you, both in terms of promotions or bonuses or getting to go to training or whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. By being the kind of person who's indispensable and irreplaceable, you align other people to support you. And then the final bullet point here is be worth far more than you're paid. No one is in any role in any company where it doesn't make sense to pay you $50,000 a year if the work that you do isn't worth considerably more than $50,000 a year. So just understand, if you can kind of quantify or at least have a rough idea of how it is that your contributions are worth more to the company than what you get paid, then you really understand where you kind of fit in the scheme of things and why it matters to your company that you're there. I say these things because I talk to a lot of people. I probably conduct about 20 interviews a week. I have these kinds of discussions with people. And my experience is that while some people have a vague notion of it, or during the course of our conversation, they'll kind of think about it and make something up, far too people are aware of these kinds of things in advance. It's clearly not something that's top of mind for them. So what I'm suggesting is that if, when you're employed, these kinds of things are top of mind for you, then things are going to go really well for you with regard to career advancement, because other people notice. And the real truth is that, if you're invisible inside of an organization, then it's pretty difficult to advance your career, to even get, permission to go to training, to even, get, a new resource that you want. Your invisibility makes life difficult. The more you can become visible, I don't mean by being, gregarious, and I don't mean about changing your personality. I mean by showing up and caring about the business, having career goals, and communicating with people, certainly, and understanding where you fit in the organization. These kinds of things are probably the most important things with regard to advancing your career. So now what we have this notion of, I'd say that less than 5% of the people who I talk to have what I'd call even reasonably well-defined career goals. But those who do generally land the job. Those who do generally get the promotion. Those who do, the probability of their advancing their career and being successful in whatever it is they're trying to achieve is significantly higher than those who don't, because it's just the clarity that comes with setting the goals is what matters. And then, the second thing we talked about is this idea of a professional mindset, not being a paycheck employee. A paycheck employee shows up just to get paid, and then when the day's over, they're ready to go. And, tomorrow we start over again. At the end of every day, we're all even because I did my work and you paid me. Okay, cool. There's nothing wrong with that. That's good. I wish more people would be like that. But that isn't the behavior that really helps you advance your career. You're there to achieve goals and help others and contribute to the business success. So, I'm Han. We're kind of at a topic break again, so I thought I'd drop in and see if there's anything we should talk about.
No, nothing has come in. Everyone, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in. We're taking breaks just to answer them, so you don't have to feel like you need to hold them off to the end. But so far, nothing's come in. You're doing such a good job, Gary.
Well, and maybe it doesn't lend itself as well to questions and such, but I just wonder, if you think about it, have you done these things? Do you have a set of career goals? And me, I run a small business, and we have goals for revenue, and we have other kinds of goals that are a measure of our business's success. And essentially, if you think about your career as your business, I mean, that's your primary source of income, at least it is for most people. Just like sales and service delivery is, of primary concern to the success of our company, the same is true with the success of your career. So if you think about it a little bit more in terms of your career as an asset, and your career isn't just a series of jobs, your career is larger than that. Your career is that flow through the jobs and the work that you do. Those things that are really going to contribute to where you're trying to take your career and the things you're trying to achieve. It's cliche, but there's so many quotes around. If you don't know where you're going, you're probably going to get there. And that's true. If you don't know where you're going, you're going to get where other people place you and where they want you to be, which is, if you're good and you're happy in your job and you just stay focused and you get that job done, then that's where you're going to get to stay. Now, that might be just fine too, because of your career goals. If you got to this place where you've achieved all of the goals you had and you just want to get better and better at what you do, congratulations. I mean, that's awesome. A lot of people never achieve that. So, but a lot of people, or most people, have some notion of other things they want to do and more that they want to do. So if you haven't achieved your career goals, then setting them helps you really understand whether or not that's true. So if you have career goals and you have this professional mindset and you find yourself not achieving your goals, then sometimes it's a really good time to execute an effective job search. And so let's dive into that a little bit. We have a whole session that we do on the details of how to run an effective job search, but we're going to kind of I'm going to give you kind of a shorthand version of that and give you a few examples. And what I've found is that it's not surprising. Most people don't change jobs all that often. Some of the people who do change jobs really often, I see that too, 3 months, 6 months, 4 months, or what have you. Usually they're not advancing their career. Oftentimes they're going backwards. But the notion, most people don't change jobs all that often, and they don't necessarily know how many choices they have and all of the things that they could do to run a more effective job search. You know, people have this idea that there's jobs posted and I apply to jobs and I wait. If I get called for an interview, I go into an interview, I answer questions, and then it's left up to everybody else. So if they didn't post the job, you can't have it. If they didn't reach out to you, then you're not going to interview. And if you go into the interview and you just answer their questions, um, you know, you're just like everybody else, and you're waiting for someone else to pick you. Whereas the notion of executing an effective job search is to, identify those companies and those teams that can help you achieve your goal and reach out to them and find the next opportunity and go get more than one offer, because that's the way that you can really, have goals, know what they are, understand your profession and what it is that you do to make a difference, understand where it is you're going, and then execute an effective job search to go get that next step, not just get a job. Again, your career isn't just a series of jobs. A series of jobs is part of your career, but if you have these career goals and when you're in the process of changing jobs, then executing an effective job search makes all the difference in the world. So let me share with you a few things on executing an effective job search. And this is one of the things that I probably know the most about. Most of my time in my career, I've been on the other side of the equation, which is helping organizations hire people. But inside of those organizations, I certainly see, I see the success of people moving forward. And then I also see the behavior of hiring managers and how that all happens. So here's the thing. You're always hired for your future potential. And what I mean by that is that regardless of whether the hiring manager knows it or not, and sometimes the hiring manager's hair is on fire. That means that they've needed somebody for weeks. The team is overworked, right? Their hair is on fire and they're really focused just on today. But if they have choice, if there's more than one person who is hireable at the time that they need to hire someone, they're really going to hire the person who most likely has the best future potential on their team. Now, the way that they do that, of course, and whether they're aware of it or not, I'm not sure, but this is really the way that it goes, is that it's common in an interview that people will review your career history. And that's because that's the information that they have to work with. But what's really going on is that, if this is the point at which you're hired, right? This line started over here, really, it should be here. This is the past, moving into prison. If this is the point at which you're hired, they're generally hiring you because they can see you as being a star in the future, kind of going, all right, this is a person who can make a difference on your team. So during your job search process, if you really clearly understand that people aren't hiring you for your past, they're really not. Your past just gives them some notion of evidence as to whether or not you're likely to be successful in the role that they need you to play. What would be better is if the person who's hiring you and the people who you're interviewing with had a crystal ball and they could see into the future. The person who they're going to select is the person who in the future, whatever time horizon that is, normally it's measured in years. If they had a crystal ball and could see which of these people was really committed, who was really a strong leader in whatever their role was, that they were focused on business results and teamwork, that they had a really strong work ethic, those are the people who they're going to hire. In the crystal ball, very rarely is it going to be, well, they showed up and they did their job. Okay, maybe. Oh, wow, look at this. So, when they're looking at the crystal ball, they're looking for the person who's going to be most successful in the future. So just know when you're executing an effective job search, while most people your resume is about your past, people tend to describe themselves in terms of the past. One of the key ways to really run an effective job search is to really think about yourself from not just yourself, but your ability to do work and project that out into the future. Because if you are not able to paint a compelling story of your success and your abilities moving forward, then you must be leaving that up to an exercise for another person to do. And that's very difficult for someone else to do. So to the degree that you can understand this and you can think about it in terms of projecting and painting a picture of your success moving forward, then your job search will go much better for you. This kind of goes back to this whole notion too, that people who have clear career goals are more interesting, they're more attractive, if you will. There are people are compelled to them. So your career goals, even in your interviews, will really be helpful to you, because you're now able to, if somebody asks you the question, so tell me a little bit about yourself, you're able to describe yourself in a compelling way that includes where you are currently, your skills, your interests, where you thrive. And if you can add to that what your goals are and where it is you're trying to go, and explain to the other individual how it is that the role that you're interviewing for is going to help you achieve your goals, you just put yourself at the front of the line, because no one else who's interviewing will be doing that, right? No one else. I rarely have anyone. The people who do are able to have that conversation with me, the rate of them being hired into great jobs is much higher than the people who can't and don't. And I don't think that it's that they're any better. There are people who get hired who aren't that I see the strong potential they have, but they don't necessarily have goals. It makes a lot of difference in terms of your ability to be able to communicate who you are, what you do, and paint this compelling picture of you in the future. So this is probably the slide that I really wanted to show. So, in an ideal world, what a hiring manager wants to hire is somebody who looks like this, right? You've done all this kind of stuff in the past. You continue to be more successful. You're indispensable and you're irreplaceable. You're getting better and better and better at what it is you do. I get to hire you right here. And I'm so excited because we don't have crystal balls that show into the future. What we have is your career history. So if your career history looked like this, and I'm hiring you right here, then wow, the likelihood of that continuing is really high. Rarely does a hiring manager have a chance to do that. So the closer you can look to this, the lower risk you are, and the more likely it is that someone's going to hire you. Now, the truth, though, is that most of us, our background looks more like this. In fact, it's probably more disjoint than that. If you look at my career as an example, I'll take myself as an example. I started my career as an engineer in electrical engineering and software engineering, and did a lot of really interesting things in that. I left the software engineering world, went into IT infrastructure, and then I left the IT infrastructure world and went into entrepreneurship and recruiting. So, my background is kind of all over the place. And a lot of people's are. In fact, some of the most interesting people that I know have rather eclectic backgrounds. But that eclectic background doesn't enable someone to easily see and project your success out into the future. So because it's difficult for other people to see how what you've done in the past is relevant to your ability to be successful in the future, then it's up to you to do that. So, if your background and your career history is a little bit spotty or very different than, if you're in career transition and you're moving out of being a nurse and into IT, or any kind of a fairly dramatic career shift, then your background is not going to look exactly like that. And so your ability to bridge this gap makes all the difference in the world. Let me give you an example that I use frequently, but I think it's a really great example. I was working with a company that wanted to hire some people onto the software quality assurance team, and they were a medical software company that provides a platform to hospitals and uh, nursing care facilities and assisted living communities, things of that nature. And a big part of this application is the pharmaceutical side, which tracks what pharmaceuticals are dispensed to the patients, and then also the ordering side and the rest. So it's a really critical piece of this platform that is used by hospitals to track all of that medication. The FDA comes out with new rules frequently, and they have 6 weeks to comply with whatever the new rules are. So the software QA team that tests the front end is critical to them. So they needed somebody with a lot of attention to detail, who could cross all the T's and dot all the I's, who wouldn't get bored with it, because most of us would get bored with it, and we would know that, oh, we want to drop that drop down. And they needed someone who would touch every drop down, click every button, and do that repeatedly over weeks and weeks and days and months because of the changes to the system. And they had a lot of automation, but the final test was a human being sitting there and doing everything that the application could do and following this 20-page guide and doing every single step. So the person who we presented for the role to the hiring manager had been in a manufacturing organization that builds components for fighter aircraft. And these components are welded. And so for about 4 years, this person had advancing levels of responsibility, but it was about inspecting welds and x-raying welds and checking torque on bolts and things of that nature, filling out this long checklist, writing it all down, filing all these complex pieces of paper with certain federal authorities. I don't know who they were, but very similar, just a totally different aspect. So my point is that when we presented this candidate to the hiring manager, the immediate feedback was, hey, this person doesn't know anything about software. I mean, I need a software QA professional. So I was able to talk to the hiring manager and say, whoa, wait a second. So what we have is a person who has extreme attention to detail, day in and day out, in a repetitive kind of nature, that they cross all the T's, they dot every I, they go through a complex checklist. They've been proven to be able to do that for years and years and years. They got promotions as a result of that, became team leader. They're used to filing complex paperwork. And, as soon as I had that conversation with the hiring manager, what the hiring manager said was, oh, that makes sense. So this person moved forward. Not only did they move forward, they got hired. And I checked in just a couple of months ago because I use the story a lot. And that person is wildly successful on their user interface QA team. The moral in the story is that the individual who I'm talking about didn't and couldn't tell that story for themselves. One second. Sorry about that. They didn't and couldn't tell that story for themselves. So when I told it for them, then, oh, it makes sense. My point is that other people aren't necessarily able to translate who you are and what you do in your past into, oh, that makes sense. So if your background is a little bit disjoint, what somebody's trying to hire is this. The individual I was talking about background didn't even look like this. It looked like it was totally off on another page. But by having the conversation that I had, a hiring manager who was really busy, who was focused on just user interface QA and couldn't see the possibility that an individual who hadn't been doing software QA before, this call must be important. Hey, I don't. You're in the middle of my webinar right now, so I figured whether you called a couple of times. So, okay. All right, bye. That was someone who works at New Horizons, so I thought that maybe there was something wrong with my webinar. Sorry about that. Let me just turn my phone off. I have it on, I have a new phone. I thought I had it on silent. I clearly don't know how to make this thing go on silent. 1 second. So sorry. There we go. Now I know it's on silent. Where was I? So the whole notion here is that it really is up to you to be able to show how what you did in the past is relevant to what you do in the future as a part of an effective job search. Because if you leave it up to other people to do that, they're not going to be so good at it. And because what they're going to do is, if your background looks like this, they're going to keep searching for someone who looks like this, or select someone who looks more like that. And if you can reshape your background and explain it in this sort of a way, then you get other people to say, oh, that makes sense. So let's talk for just a second about how to do that. The simplest way to do that is, the detailed skills of what this individual did in terms of inspecting welds and x-raying metal and torque on bolts, none of that transferred into this new role in software QA. None of the specifics, the agencies he filed, the paperwork that he filed, all of the details, none of it was the same at all. But what is the same are, what do the general characteristics of success look like? So if you can back off from the details and get to the root characteristics of the work that you did, then you talk about those things. So the way that you do that is by, think about the role that makes sense for you. Think about the role that's going to help you achieve your goals. And then imagine the person who's wildly successful in that role. Think of somebody who's a real achiever in the role that will help you achieve your career goals. What is it about the person who's much better and a much better achiever than somebody who's just okay at that role? What's the difference? And of course, their specific skills is a component of that. But what you want to think about is those kinds of things that you've probably done. And what are the characteristics? So let's just say that it's IT role. Well, the characteristics of somebody who's going to be a great network engineer. I'm working on hiring an IT network manager right now. So if your goal was to become an IT network manager, what are the things that make someone successful? Well, in this particular role, they're doing a bunch of mergers of companies, and this is real live right now. They're merging a bunch of companies. So their ability to set a clear vision with other people and to communicate with people such that they get aligned behind some of the changes that are coming, because the real problem they're going to have in this network integration is not going to be the technology. It's going to be the people who aren't engaged, the people who are going to fight this, so their ability to communicate and engage the trust of other people is really critical. So if that was a role that made sense for you, where have you demonstrated that before? So, if you were in the military and your job was, you were running the team that fueled jet aircraft in remote locations, clearly you must have strong leadership skills and the ability to get people aligned behind the mission and get people to pull on the rope really hard. So, there's one. Another aspect of this role is that they're very process oriented, because they're going to have to take the process from 15 different companies and align those all into one consistent process. So they're going to have to lead the people, find the process, update the process in such a way that it achieves the business goals as well as aligns the people. And then third, they're going to have to align the technology behind it, figure out what network resources they have that can be reused, what are they going to do, because after they get these 15 companies all integrated together, they're going to go into acquisition mode and buy more. So some of the people who are in consideration, their quote unquote skill set in terms of the technical side isn't necessarily the same technology you're going to use, because this company doesn't have many computers. They've got credit card processing machines, and they got cameras, and they got GPSs. So very few people have specific skill with those things who are on the network side. So every single one of the network managers who are in consideration right now don't have experience with the specific technologies that this company uses. It's a vending company. They got 25,000 vending machines and 2,500 micro markets. They've got 75,000 devices on their network, none of which are computers. But these individuals' ability to really show how they can lead people, how they can, resolve process and implement new technology systems is the thing that matters. My point is that if you look at what is going to make you wildly successful in this next step in your career, that isn't just the detailed skills of the task you perform, and you think about those characteristics of leadership or attention to detail or customer service or whatever the list happens to be, then you can look at the roles that you had in the past, see where you exhibited those kinds of characteristics before, and then in your resume, as well as in your conversations about your past, you really talk about those things. Another simple example would be that if you're transitioning from nursing into IT, then drawing blood and taking care of patients and making sure that they were getting their right medication, those things don't translate in another person's mind into success in IT. But what does is, as a nurse, I was the go-to person on the floor for all computing issues. A significant amount of our time was on computers, and our ability to not only use them, but for them to work effectively, had a significant impact on patient care. We had to have attention to detail, had to log everything right. And that's going to get to the point where somebody who's looking at what you did as a nurse transitioning into IT will say, oh, that makes sense. So I don't want to belabor this anymore, but I can't overemphasize how if you go to market in an effective job search and you just try to let your past be the tasks you performed in the past, you leave it as an exercise to another person to figure out how to translate your past into reasons why you're going to be successful in the future, because what they want is this. If you are that, then you need to do this so that the other person says, oh, that makes sense. So it's up to you to make those things happen. If you leave it as an exercise to someone else, that's hard to do, and they don't know you. So things will go much better for you if you do that. Mayan, do we have any questions about that? That might be a topic that there may be some questions around. I think it's really critical. It's not easy to do. It takes some thought to get it done, but it's really doable. It's about showing how what you've learned in the past applies to your future. I mean, I was a software engineer in the beginning of my career. I spent 95% of my time writing software, but I did lead a team. I did interview people, I did hire people, I did manage people. So if I had a resume that was talking about my time as a software engineer, I might not even put my title software engineer. I might put my title as team lead. And then I probably wouldn't, in the description of my job, I probably would talk very little about software. I would probably talk about the fact that I interviewed people, that I managed people, that I, mentored people to be successful in their career. Those are the things, because that's the only thing that's relevant to what I do anymore. And it isn't most of what I did, but it's the only things that I did at that period of time that would that translate to the future. If I'd gone through the details of what I did as an engineer, then that would actually work against me with regard to the kinds of work that I do in the future, because I would start getting questions like, well, why'd you ever leave software engineering, right? Those kinds of questions don't help. And I told you, I'll stop in a second, but I want to finish this one last thought. So the one last thought is that hiring and getting hired and advancing your career and getting promotions and getting raises and getting to go to training and achieving your goals, it isn't just one big decision that people are making. These decisions are a whole series of micro decisions. So it's easiest to talk about it in the terms of job search and getting hired. And these are, as soon as somebody opens your resume, they have an impression. In fact, prior to that, the name on your resume, right? If your name says Gary O'Neill resume, okay. But if it says G. O'Neill sales resume V3, March 2019, that makes people go, well, this is your sales resume. And what other sales resume do you have? And what are all these different versions? And have you been doing this since March? So all of a sudden I give them all kind of, so even at that level, people are making micro decisions. And as human beings, we have this thing called confirmation bias, which is once we've decided something, we tend to look for evidence to reinforce the decision that we already made. So these decisions come with sound effects, not literally, but they do. You can think of them as decisions that are like, oh, yeah, great, yeah, those kind of sound effects. The other ones come with, maybe, right? So the whole point is that because these micro decisions are being made all the time, it's up to you to manage those kinds of things and get people to say, oh, that makes sense. So that's my whole point. How do you take your past and present it in such a way that somebody understands why this role will make sense to you and help you achieve your goals and why you're likely to be successful? So, Mayan, what do you think? How are you?
Oh, good. There are a couple questions that actually did come in during this portion.
Okay.
Just kind of going back to what you were saying about, things in the past, and you kind of touched upon it. The question was, should all of your experience and things that you've done be explained in a cover letter, since you said that the resume is something that's now of the past?
So, the bulk of the space on your resume, unless you're new to the workforce, the bulk of your resume in terms of literal words and space is going to be about your career history, because that's what people expect it to be, obviously. Um, Remind me one more time. What was the key thing in the question?
The key thing was, should all this be put in a cover letter since
Oh,
the
yeah.
resume?
Great. So here's the thing about cover letters. They're rarely even read. If somebody asks for one, it's probably nice to have one, but if you assume that they're going to read your cover letter, that's probably a bad assumption. Sometimes it's going to happen, but I rarely do. I rarely do. Sometimes I do, but they're often skipped over. So if the information is important, just know that it's not likely to be in your cover letter. My notion of a cover letter is this, is that at the top of your resume in the summary section, right? The summary section at the top of your resume, the summary section at the top of your resume shouldn't just be a short version of your work history. That's just a waste. What your summary really ought to be is your professional brand. It ought to be forward looking. It ought to talk about what it is that you do and what you achieve. And then if you have that as the summary of your resume and you're presenting a cover letter, your cover letter is essentially the exact same thing that's in the summary of your resume. The difference is going to be in the summary of your resume, it's probably bullet pointed, because your resume is going to be, should probably be very bullet point oriented. I can tell you that the early stage people who are doing resume review and applicant tracking systems where you apply for a job, they're looking at hundreds and hundreds of resumes. Paragraphs are difficult to read. Bullet points are a lot easier. Be bullet point heavy in your resume. I promise you it'll help you. But the bullet point version will turn into kind of a paragraph or prose version in your cover letter. And that way you got this consistent story. And that story, there's a pattern to it. And, in resumes that rock and some of the other things you're driving into that story. But it's really going to tell the story about, the roles that you play, what makes you unique, the problems that you solve, the skills that you have, your career goals moving forward. That's what's going to be in the summary of your resume, and that probably really ought to be what's in your cover letter. Just assume with regard to cover letters that they're often disregarded, and don't bank on somebody even looking at them. So that's my deal with cover letters.
Great. The next one's kind of a lengthy one. It's kind of a question hybrid comment. It is, I think the issue I'm having in transitioning between positions in my career is that I've done most of this in a current place in admin positions, but now what? How do I transition all of these great points that I've had experience with into a new place in a
Sure.
new career? I am at the rethinking stage of my career. So what will be the next 30 and what will be the most important thing to identify in terms of my goal?
Right. Okay, great. So hopefully I'm understanding the question correctly, but here's the thing. So I think, we're talking about somebody who's had, significant success, that they have had a lot of experience doing a variety of different things, have, moved around inside of companies and have, pretty broad understanding of things. Maybe have been at some companies for some period of time. And maybe considering making some kind of a career transition, maybe even to something that's radically different. So I think that the approach to that is really the same as even if you had been on one single path and we're still moving forward, which is have really clear goals about what you're trying to achieve in your career so you can evaluate, at a financial level, on a family level, on a location level, on a lifestyle issue and the rest, anything that matters to you so that you can better evaluate which careers are going to be meaningful to you. So I think that, and I have no idea how this individual feels or is with this, the idea, if you go to market and you kind of go, man, I'm open to lots of stuff. I have, I'm a box of tools and I have a lot of background and experience and all kinds of things. How would you like to use me? Here I am, I got lots of capabilities, put me to work, give me a chance. That's very difficult for someone to do. So step number one is narrow your scope down to some specific types of roles that will really leverage what it is you do and really help you achieve your career goals. One of the ways you can do that, by the way, and picking a new career, picking a new job type area, One of the things you can do is go to LinkedIn in your area and see how many people are in roles like that today. If there are only 5 people in your area in roles like that, maybe you pick a different one. If there are thousands, then there's really opportunity in there. So you can kind of use that. So my point is, get really clear on where you want to take your career, and make sure that that achieves your career goals and leverages what you did in the past. Now that you've done that and you can be clear, I'm going to transition into sales, I'm going to transition into IT, I'm going to transition into nursing, I'm going to transition into whatever it is you're going to transition into. Now imagine somebody who's going to be wildly successful in the role that you're transitioning into. Now, generally, if you're in career transition, I mean, even if you had been a manager in the past, you're probably not coming in as a manager. You're probably coming in as an individual contributor. You're likely to kind of take a step back in income and stuff for a period of time, but you can accelerate forward a lot faster than someone who doesn't have as much, real life and real world experience as perhaps you do. But now what you do is you look at all, what is it that someone is going to be successful in this role besides the skill that they have? What other characteristics is going to make somebody really successful? Does it have to do with, great customer service skills? Maybe that's a thing. Maybe it has something to do with mathematics. Maybe it has, so whatever those things are that are going to be the characteristics of why you'll stand out in that role, or imagine someone who really stands out in that role versus somebody who's average about it, then it'll tell you the characteristics that you'll need to exhibit. And then you can go back to the things you did in the past and find examples of where you've done not similar types of tasks necessarily, but where you've exhibited similar, where have you shown great customer service skills before? Where have you shown this stuff? Because in your resume and even in your interviews, all the detail of what you did in the past doesn't really matter. Not all of it. Only a fraction of it, and only that part that's relevant to where it is you're going. So your resumes and your interviews and all of that are about telling the truth, and nothing but the truth, but not necessarily the whole truth, because if I told the whole truth about all the detailed technical work that I used to do in the past and I was interviewing for a director of recruiting job, that doesn't help me. That doesn't help me. It actually hurts me. So the only thing, if somebody wanted to go back to early stages in my career, that I'd talk about would be leading and hiring people, understanding how to interview people and teaching other people to do it. That's the only thing I talk about, despite the fact that that was probably only about 1% of what it was that I did. It's the truth. It's nothing but the truth. It's just not the whole truth, because if you're in career transition, the whole truth about what you did in the past is irrelevant, right? Hopefully that makes sense. What do you think, Mayan? Is that good?
Great. We have one more question kind of tied to this,
Okay.
came in. The person says, I've been running my own business for 30 years. The first thing I am asked, why do I want to come back to work for a organization? I tell them I'm joining a larger organization and IoT has changed the marketplace. Do you think this is negative, or is this okay to put out there?
Read that last part again about the IoT. Tell me about that again.
Their reasoning to leaving their own business and coming to work for a larger organization. The person is saying that they would like to join a bigger company versus working for themselves, and how IoT is now starting to change how business is run and how technology is changing as well. So they want to be a part of that.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, I think both of those things are certainly fine to talk about, and people are going to be curious about why it is that it's time in your career. I bet the reasons why go beyond that. What's going to make sense to people is, let's put it this way. Anytime you're having a conversation about a transition, why did you change jobs? Why did you leave that company? Anytime, why this move? Why this change? In general, the best way to approach that is to start with the idea of why, about where you're going and about why that matters to you. And a lot of those things do say that. And certainly not about why you're leaving. So why you're leaving something is not nearly as interesting as why you're going somewhere. So certainly the notion about IoT and some of those things make sense. Now, the idea of being with a larger organization, well, why that? Why that? I think that the idea of being, in this particular case, I want to be with a larger organization. Okay, it's not real satisfying. I mean, it's like, well, okay, why? I mean, is it for the security? Is it for the, why do you want to be part of a larger organization? And if your real answer is, well, because it's safer there, don't tell somebody that, right? That's probably not it. If you're transitioning out of your own company, it might be around, I've gotten to the point where I really want to work with a team of people. Right now I'm the expert at what it is that I do, and my rate of learning really isn't where I need it to be. And I think that in my career, that the thing that's most important at this point in time, so it's about talking about what's compelling and getting really honest. And if you have really clear career goals, this goes all the way back to the beginning, then your real story is, because this move is going to help me achieve my career goals, and my career goals are these. And so if someone's talking to you about why you want to make this change, then the answer really ought to be, because this change will help me achieve my career goals, and specifically this, this, and this. And again, there's this notion of, if someone goes, oh, that makes sense, they just had kind of this aha moment, which is really delightful. People like it because they learn something. And when a light bulb goes on for them in such a way that they feel, oh, that makes sense, that's what they really want to feel. So it may not be as simple as, well, I want to work for a larger company and IoT and stuff is changing. Okay, cool, that's fine. But that doesn't really talk about what your career goals are. So if you define your career goals and get really clear about that, well, here's what I really want to achieve. I want to learn these kinds of things, right? I want to have this kind of an impact. I want to have, this kind of an income, whatever it is. That's what is probably going to work best for almost every situation. So.
Great. I think we can move on.
Okay, great. Thank you. We've talked about a lot of these things, so I'm going to move through some of these slides fairly quickly. So there's this notion of your current skills and your transferable skills. Your current skills are about your ability to do the work, right? Can you perform the task? Because I can't hire you into a job where it isn't clear that you can even perform the tasks. So, your current skill is about your ability to do the work. And if you can't do the work, it doesn't make sense for you to have the job. They shouldn't offer it to you. And if they do, you should turn it down. And I don't like the phrase transferable skills, but it's your transferable experience and expertise and being in business and the rest that adds depth to what it is that you do, that kind of rounds everything out. So your ability to do the work in this larger context is really what makes you powerful. So we're going to talk a little bit more about how to work with this notion of transferable skills. Mostly we've already kind of gone over it, which is, imagine the person who's going to be wildly successful in the next role that makes sense to you. What is it about the person who's really successful that differentiates them from somebody who's really poor? And I don't mean one of them is maybe they're just better at doing the tasks. Okay, that's fine. But it's really going to be more than that. How did they become indispensable? How do they become irreplaceable? What are the things that make them better than other people who are doing it, that aren't just their ability to wield the screwdriver or turn the thing or configure the router or whatever task they perform? So it's all about highlighting these transferable characteristics and what characteristics will make someone important. There is this tool that's out there that may be helpful for you on this. It's called ONET Online. I'll show you let me show you real quick what ONET Online looks like. Right here, it looks like one ton line, but it's really ONET Online, one ton line. And it should be coming up in my browser. Hang on a second. Well, cannot download the information I requested. Let me, hang on a second. I'm going to bring up a browser and just go to onetonline.org for you. One ton line, ONET Online. And while that's coming up, there we go. The other thing on this next slide I want to share with you is that ONET Online, it works off of these things called SOC codes. And these SOC codes are kind of the way that the federal government outlines different jobs and different roles. So ONET Online is organized by these. And what you'll find if you're a New Horizons student is that our programs align really well with these, with these SOC codes. So, project manager work and training at New Horizons aligns well with general operations and managers. If you look at that one, the A+ technician, which is called SITA at some of the New Horizons locations, matches really well with computer user support specialist. So you can begin to see which of our programs and which of our training align with some of these SOC codes. So that might be useful to you. But if we just take this one, 151151, I'm going to copy that and just show you one of the ways you can use ONET online. If I go over here and I put in that occupation code, this thing operates off of those. And I can search for different roles too here if I want to. There's this one, user support specialist, has a bright outlook. This is one of the reasons why the federal government will support people in terms of getting this kind of training. Here's the SOC code. Let's go see what it has to say about it. And one of the things you can use this tool for is to help it jog your thoughts and your memory about some of the characteristics that might make somebody successful in this job. So, these are the tasks. When we start getting down into here, technology skills, yeah, but these things are just general skills. But now we start getting into active listening and reading comprehension and complex problem solving and critical thinking and oral comprehension and interacting with computers. They don't have customer service and stuff, which I think is really important, but face-to-face discussions, contact with others, importance of being exact or accurate. So you can use this tool to kind of look at these kinds of things and see what things people commonly associate with someone being successful in this role. And then you can just go through it and, can you give examples of where you had an interaction with computers? Well, yeah, I was a nurse. Look at all this interaction that I did. What about gathering information? What about, and so you can now find these things which other people have decided that are probably important with the kind of role that makes sense for you. And you can evaluate and think about where you've done those kinds of things in the past. So you might find ONET online as a useful tool just to help you kind of jog your thoughts and your memory around some of the things, because this exercise that I'm asking you to do, which is to really understand what it's going to take to be successful in a role, is it's a little bit challenging, but I know you're up for the task. So there's that. Final couple of things on this, and we're doing great on time. Final couple of things on this whole notion of running an effective job search is that if you're in a program that has certifications, and IT is certainly one of them, medical billing and coding, there's all kinds of accountants have CPAs and other kinds of things. These certifications, be it CompTIA A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, whatever the certifications are, the reason why certifications matter is, particularly if you're a careers transition, is they reduce risk. Because if I'm in a situation where I could hire someone who's in career transition, who might have been doing one thing in the past and is now going to do something dramatically different in the future, they've been in manufacturing, now they're going into software user QA. That certifications, if you're transitioning into something, mean that you don't know nothing. They go beyond that, of course, but it reduces the risk to the hiring manager, because if someone is looking at hiring someone and you have the set of all people with certifications in that area, then you know that there's few, if any, people in that group of people who don't understand and have at least the basic ability to do the job. Of the set of all people without certifications, it's a lot harder to tell, and it's a lot easier to hire someone. Although there's some great people in that set, right? There are some of the people who are best at what they do don't have certifications, but just understand the whole value of your certification is, part of it was the learning you had to do to pass it, but having the certification after the fact is just a demonstration of your ability to do the work, and certifications reduce the risk on behalf of the hiring manager. Most hiring managers don't hire a lot of people. One of the most important decisions they make are hiring decisions. In fact, hiring the wrong person can be career limiting for the hiring manager. So it's a really important decision for them, and you having certifications is going to reduce risk. So with regard to executing an effective job search, particularly if you're in career transition, really leverage these certifications because they reduce risk. When you're highlighting current skills, you can be prepared with example, focus on results, the lessons learned. and your ability and interest in learning. If you're with New Horizons and you're going through a training program, that is gonna be a big part of you being successful in career transition, which is someone seeing your motivation and your dedication to learning. It's really important. But what I also hear and see a lot of is when you have people, when you're in a career transition, I have people often say, but I don't have the experience. So I think that you do. And I think you have more experience than you think that you do. It's just that it seems like people often connect with experience with being paid. Experience isn't about being paid. Experience is about your ability to use your current and your past skills to get things done and to create results. So, in any specific skill area, you have experience through the training that you've done, through the exercise you've had, through your mental understanding, and the fact that you haven't exercised that muscle all that much doesn't mean that you don't have any experience. Now, it is true that you don't have as much experience as you'll have 5 years from now, but the truth is everyone who's in every role today started in it with no experience. And when I first started doing recruiting kinds of things, I had no experience in recruiting whatsoever. Everyone who is in IT today at one point had no experience in IT. So whatever it is that you're transitioning into, or whatever position that makes the most sense for you, just know that there are thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people in certain careers where people have gone before you and they absolutely were able to land a job without any quote unquote experience, if experience was a measure of being paid. So don't hold yourself back because you think you don't have experience. It's not about that. It's not about your past, it's about your future. And so if you're confident in your ability to get things done and create results, then focus on those kinds of things and talk about the experience that you do have and your experience for which you didn't get paid, including going to school, going into training. That's real stuff. The other thing with respect to having those kind of communications and executing an effective job search is that, like we talked about so many times, it's up to you to translate your past experience. If you can teach somebody something and let them have this aha moment of clarity where it says that makes sense, then things generally go really well. So you have to make your past experience relevant because someone else can. And what relevant really means is these are the things that you think are important, which sometimes people include way too much detail about what they did in the past that isn't really relevant anymore. So this is the stuff you think is important. This is what interest is important to them. And those things that are at the intersection is not only what's relevant, but in your interviews and in your resume, that's the only thing that you want to think about and communicate about, because more than that actually makes you less. So you got to focus on what's relevant. And what's relevant is the things about you and your experience and your skills and your expertise and your drive and your motivation that's going to make you successful in this role that you're transitioning into. All right. So, we have some other webinars that go into this in detail. Resumes that rock, we go into detail about how to create a great resume that really tells your story. The short version of that is that one simple way to see whether or not your resume is great is read it from the bottom up. Start at the bottom with the things that are furthest back and read it from bottom to top and see if it tells a story. And the story you want to tell is one that shows, how what you did in the past was relevant and how it leads you to today and how it projects you out into the future in your career summary in such a way that someone might go, oh, that makes sense, right? So that's probably the one and simplest way to see whether your resume is good is, does it tell a compelling story from the bottom up, brings you to the current state with your career, with your summary of your resume, projecting that out in the future. And if it tells a story, it's probably in pretty good shape. We talk about leveraging LinkedIn, which is really important in terms of an effective job search. Not only, it's not about just applying for jobs, it's about going and finding people and reaching out to them. The majority of jobs are never posted. Most hires are not the result of a job being posted, probably less than 15% are. So if you're executing a job search and the only thing you're doing is applying for jobs that are online, then you're missing the majority of the marketplace. And we talked to you about how to leverage LinkedIn in terms of being able to be easy to being easy to find, as well as using LinkedIn to find other people and create opportunities for yourself. We have one on effective job search strategies, which takes this whole topic and really expands on it, as well as a senior interview. So we certainly encourage you to help us with those. So here's where we're at. Where we're at is we've been talking about setting career goals, and that's come up a number of different times, how useful that is for you. It doesn't have to be a big exercise, but I really encourage you to put together a set of career goals, to have this professional mindset, to move outside of the notion of it's a job because you get paid, and turn it into something where you're really trying to help the company achieve success, help others achieve success, and become indispensable in the organization. When it's time to make a change, how to execute an effective job search. And then when you land a new job, I suggest that you start thinking about managing your career in kind of 90-day increments, quarter-long increments, quarter one, January, February, March, quarter two, April, May, June, and kind of look at it in those time frames. So the question you might want to ask yourself is, what's going to happen on your first day and your first week on your new job? And I've literally been asking people this question for the last couple of years since I've been doing this session. And the general answer is I go, well, I guess I'm going to do some paperwork, and I guess I'll find out where my desk is and get new accounts. And, and essentially what they're saying is they're leaving it up to other people to determine what's going to happen in their first day and their first week. Well, I also see a lot of people who kind of go, man, it was 10 days before I really got anything done because I had to wait on a phone, I had to wait on a computer. And it's just like, man, what an opportunity you just missed. Because I believe firmly that what's going to happen in your first day and your first week is largely up to you. That you may have some goals around that may go beyond just the work that you do. So, as an example, in your first day and your first week, it might be about meeting certain people, or about understanding how your job impacts other people, or understanding what people who have been in this role before did to be wildly successful. I mean, what are you going to do in the first week that other people aren't going to do for you? And it's generally probably in terms of meeting people, understanding things, and understanding more about where you fit inside of the organization and how you can make a difference. What's going to happen during the first month? So, sometimes people are just waiting, and they're just waiting to get tasked. And I'm kind of going, all right, what you really ought to do is have some goals beyond that. Within the first month, you're going to be really clear on what the specific goals are for your role. You're going to baseline your ability to get work done. You're going to baseline this notion of how many tasks or how many tickets or how many whatever it is you can get done, and have some goal around baselining that so that you know how to accelerate, so you know how to get more done in the future. That's just one example of what's going to happen during your first month. And it may be the case that in your career goals, you have some notion of learning something new. So it could be in your first month that you establish this notion that this is an area where you really want to grow and where you really want to learn. So, another one of your first month goals could be to share your career goals with people who are on your team, and with your new supervisor. So what's going to happen during your first month, and what are you going to make happen? And what's going to happen in your first 90 days? By the end of the first 90 days, I'm going to have, set baselines for everything that I'm doing in the first month. I'm going to have accelerated that by some significant amount by the end of the quarter. I'm going to have made sure that I communicated clearly what my career goals and ambitions are to my supervisor, to understand the ripple effect of the work that I do and how it impacts other people, and have some basic idea of how the work that I do contributes to overall success of the company. Okay, that would be, if somebody told me that that's what your goals are and that's what's going to happen in the first 90 days, it'd be like, psh, are you kidding me? Nobody does that. Nobody does. I shouldn't say nobody. People who are pretty successful in their careers do that, but I suggest that you take it upon yourself, because no one else is going to do this for you. And these are the kinds of things that really contribute to, career advancement. There are kind of two types of goals that you have. You have your career goals that we've talked about, and then there are performance goals in terms of the specifics of getting work done at your place of employment. So the idea here is that performance goals, they might be defined for you. This number of calls, this number of patients, this number of trouble tickets, this number of those kinds of things, right? This much money, this much revenue. So sometimes your performance goals are defined for you, but certainly not always. In fact, they're going to often be quite unclear. So, by the way, you may want to clarify what the performance goals are prior to accepting a job. I was working with a company a couple of years ago that had significant failure of hiring people into their inside sales team. And when I started peeling it back, I was like, what is it that, caused such failure? I mean, they had like 80% turnover within the first 6 months for the last couple of years. And what it came down to was really simple, was that they expected people to make 150 phone calls a day. And most of the people coming into the role had never done that before, didn't want to do that before, were really surprised because even though they had been in inside sales before, they had only been expected to make maybe 50 calls a day. So it wasn't working out. Now, that could have been fixed either way. One, the employer should have made it clear that, hey, your performance goal is 150 calls a day. That's a lot, right? Or the people coming into the role probably should have asked. So just make sure that you have some notion, if you can, of clarifying what the performance goals are. Now, when you go to clarify it, it needs to not be in terms of, it needs to be in terms of, hey, I'm really curious. It's important to me to be successful. What are the things that I'm going to need to do? What is the performance goals that I'm going to have to meet? And think about it in terms of your role you're going into, and go after it in terms of, I'm a go-getter and I want to make these things happen. So tell me what the goals are so I can be ready to do it. And it may be that they tell you some goals that you just don't want to achieve, or maybe you can, but you might want to establish performance goals before you accept the job, or at least to a degree. And then what you can do, and this is what's going to happen most of the time, which is those performance goals that you're really expected to meet are going to be unclear. Set your own goals. And when you set your own goals, review those with your new supervisor, like right off the bat at the end of the first week. So if my new supervisor was Sally, I might say, hey, Sally, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my first week. So, some of the goals that I have set for myself is I'm going to make this many calls or clear this many trouble tickets or those kinds of things. Review it with them. What do you think? Will this really help me be successful here? And don't wait for other people to do that for you, right? It's your job to get that done, not other people's job to get that done. And if other people are able to define performance goals for you and clearly explain what they are, feel grateful for that. If it doesn't happen, don't feel like somebody should have done it for you. I mean, don't be a victim about that. Go make it happen. Figure out your performance goals yourself, and run a competition and run a race against yourself. All right. You also have career goals, and your career goals are stepping stones to your overall goals. They're in terms of months and quarters and weeks, and they're always defined by you. Now, some of your career goals are very appropriate to share. So as you're meeting with your new supervisor, which I suggest that you actually reach out to make those things happen, don't wait for that person. I have people all the time tell me, yeah, my supervisor never even has a review for me. It's just like, well, did you ever go create your own review and go review it with your, well, no, they should have done that. Like, okay, yeah, they should have. So they didn't. Did you? Well, no. I'm kind of going, yeah, that indignance doesn't do you a whole much a lot of good. So it's going to often be defined by you. I mean, how many times have you been in an environment where it was done by somebody else? So you define that. So, but some of your career goals are really appropriate to share, such as, my career goal is to learn this thing. My career goal is to take on this level of responsibility. So whatever those career goals are, you should always share those with your supervisor and your team as well. Other career goals you have might be private. As an example, you want to relocate to another city in 2022. Well, maybe you keep that one to yourself, maybe, but maybe not. It depends. Do they have an office in that location? Could you transfer that location? So there may be some goals that you have. One of my goals is to be able to work remote and be able to pick up my kid from school every day at 3 o'clock. All right, you have to time that one appropriately, but just know that your career goals are separate than your performance goals. Your performance goals are always on the table to talk about. Some of your career goals are okay to talk about because you want to enlist other people's help with them. Just know that some of your career goals might be private because they may not necessarily be things that your boss or your supervisor would want to support you with. All right, so what do you think, Mayan? 90-day sprints?
We do have a question that's in relation to certifications that came in. I know you said certifications reduce risk. So the person said they usually tell the hiring or the recruiting people that they are pursuing a, say, for example, PMP certification through New Horizons, and
Oh
that
yeah.
they like being self-reliant. So
Mhm.
as a recruiter yourself, if someone were to tell you that, how would you react to that?
I think that's great. I mean, I really do think that that's great. In fact, the other thing you could add to that story, which is even better, which is, and I think you said it too, which is not just the certifications, but your motivation to learn, your motivation to grow, your motivation, those motivations is what what inspired you to, work toward these kinds of certifications. And, that does show self-motivation. Here's the crude version of it is that I make my living because people get hired. And so if you are working toward certifications and you had this what do you call it, initiative to go make those things happen, and you love to learn, as a recruiter who gets paid because you get hired, I'm thinking, yay, awesome. My probability of getting paid gets much higher when you talk about things like that, which means your opportunity or probability of getting hired goes up as well. Those are great things. Thank you.
That's the only question we have so far. So onward we go.
Okay, cool. So this last section is about career navigation. And what I mean by career navigation is, how do you decide when it's time to change jobs? How do you decide when you might need to do a career transition into another team? I mean, how do you decide those things? And I see people pretty frequently who are not really happy, but they're not really doing anything about it, but they're not really sure. I take advantage of that as a recruiter, because the way that we do recruiting is mostly we reach out to people. We don't post jobs. We reach out to people, contact them about their career goals, and we find people all the time who are not necessarily unhappy, but they're not doing anything about it. But as soon as we reach out and touch base with them, they want to have a conversation because they want to consider making a move. They rarely have career goals, because the people who do are better with the career navigation part. But here's what career navigation is really all about, and kind of what I mean by career navigation. So in the old world of work, we tended to talk about climbing the corporate ladder, right? And that applies, I guess, a little bit anymore, but not a whole lot. Um, because we used to talk about in terms of, defining career success as continually getting promoted to higher levels and positions in an organization. That view of career success is kind of outdated, especially as organizations become less hierarchical and a lot more flat than they used to be. There just isn't much of a ladder anymore, relatively speaking. We've moved in, and I think it's a great thing. Businesses move to become a lot more of a meritocracy than seniority. In other words, your promotions and your ability to get training and to get the resources that you want and to make things happen have a lot more ability to do with your ability and your drive and your career ambitions than it does with how long you've been there. So the idea is that there's lots of different ways that you can move in your career, and it's not just a ladder. This particular approach is one that I find pretty valuable. And so, let's just walk through the components of this, starting here. So this notion of vertical movement, which is increasing responsibility, getting promoted, quote unquote, this upward notion, I mean, it clearly still exists in organization, even though it's in shorter supply than it was in the past. So if you're intent on following this path, be certain that your skills and career plans run parallel to the organization's overall strategic goals. Because if your personal career goals and skills and values don't align very closely to the needs of the organization, then it's really going to be frustrating for you to pursue this option, because the option just doesn't exist. So, these vertical areas of these vertical moves in terms of increasing responsibility, it is clearly one path forward, but it's by no means the only path forward, and isn't necessarily of interest to everyone. Be careful what you ask for. Do you really want to manage people? Some people are great at it. A lot of people just flat aren't. There's two other things. So lateral career changes involve changing a job, but not necessarily changing your pay or your status or your level of responsibility. These moves are beneficial to you to broaden your experience, to move from a slow-growing part of the organization to an expanding part, or to get away from an ineffective employee-boss relationship. The value in these lateral moves is in the future. And so you're building your career like you build an asset. So, it's like a savings account that pays off later. Of course, savings accounts don't pay off it anymore, but I think you get my point. There's two different ways to make a lateral move inside of a company. What we mean by lateral move is it's not going to be a significant change in pay, in status, or level of responsibility. But you can certainly make a lateral change within your organization. So there's no change in pay, status, or level of responsibility. You just move to a different team. Right now I'm working with an organization that's bringing on some machine learning engineers, and there's a person who's on their scientific development team who really wants to move into the science team and make that move. So she's really working hard to try to make a lateral move into this other team. It won't be a change in pay or status, but it'll move her into an area where it'll better help her achieve what her career goals are. It'll be interesting, right? She's in competition with other people who are external candidates and everybody else for the role. So she's going to be given a fair shot at it. But she kind of work hard to make that transition or that lateral move happen. You can also make lateral moves to change to a job that's outside your organization, but there's no pay and status. And usually you do that because here's the thing. Lateral moves are about better positioning yourself to achieve your goals. So if you're kind of stagnant and you don't seem to be moving forward with respect to achieving your career goals, then one of the things that you can do is make a lateral move, realign, and be better positioned for moving forward in the future. And then if you're in career transition, this is sometimes referred to as a realignment. So this is a career change. And it often means moving downward in pay and status and responsibilities for a period of time. And there's all kinds of reasons why this might make sense for you. But the idea is this is just a much more, lateral move. You move similarly, but it's about being able to move forward with your career. Realignment sometimes means a little bit of a step back so you can really move forward much more quickly. A friend of mine who had been with IBM Corporation for 20 some odd years got laid off about a year ago. He was making, somewhere in the neighborhood of about $200,000 a year. But he recognized that he had gotten to a strategic level, that the work that he had done wasn't going to be all that valuable to other organizations. And so he quickly did a realignment, dropped back to about $90,000 in pay, took a role as a product manager, as an individual contributor. And here we are 2 years later, he runs the team now and is back to making almost as much as he did in the past. Some of his peers are still not employed. They just became long-term unemployed. So sometimes it makes a sense to take that step back for a second, realign what you're doing, and then move forward in with regard to your career. That brings us back to career goals. If you have well-defined career goals, it makes it a whole lot easier to make these kinds of very difficult decisions. But if you have them, then you can explain to yourself and to other people why it makes sense. Final example I have on that is all the time I have people who have been fairly senior in their career interested in a much less senior position. And people always wonder, well, why would they want to do that? I mean, they're a senior manager. And sometimes the answer is, they just don't want that level of stress anymore. So as long as you're able to explain to somebody why this move, even a move backward, makes sense to you, the best way to do that is, this is the way that I'm going to achieve my career goals that include this, that, and the other. And then people will say, oh, that makes sense. So anytime, my point in career navigation is that if you reevaluate where you're at against your career goals, and you do that in these 90-day sprints, then you can begin to decide, is it really time to make a vertical move? Should I consider a lateral move to move forward faster? Do I need to drop back further and realign myself? And the last one, of course, is the enrichment piece of it, which is grow in your existing job, which is if everything's good and you're moving forward and you're achieving your career goals, and there's a reason to think that you will continue to, awesome. Stay in that and learn more and grow within the existing job you are. And congratulations, by the way. I mean, that's where things are going really well. All right, it kind of comes down to this. if you tie it back to career goals, is there opportunity for more? If you believe that there is opportunity for more, then that might mean that a vertical move is in your future, and you need to start working toward that and looking for opportunities to make a vertical move into a level of more responsibility inside of your organization. If you're already on track, then you're kind of in this enrichment phase, and you can make this decision at the end of every quarter, right? If you evaluate where you're at against your career goals, do I need to stay where I'm at? Do I need to move to another team? Do I need to move to a similar job or a similar team outside of the company? Is it time for me to get a promotion, or do I need to drop back, do something totally different so I can move forward in my career? Those are decisions you can make every quarter, right? Are you at a roadblock? Are you not going to get anywhere? Are you loggerheads with another person? Then a lateral move might be in your future. Or if you're at a flat out dead end and it's going nowhere fast, then realignment and a career change might be in order. So the idea is that you advance when you reduce risk and you increase performance. That's when you advance your careers. When you reduce risk to other people, you reduce risk to the business, you increase performance, and you become indispensable. And if you're indispensable in an organization and you have these goals you're trying to achieve, and you go to the organization and say, hey, it's important to me that I achieve these goals, how can you help me? Then if you do that repeatedly, then they can't be surprised when you're leaving the organization to make sure that that happens. And generally, if they're really clear that that's that important to you, I have clients all the time who have people who are considering leaving, who are panicking because somebody indispensable is thinking of leaving the organization. That's really how you do it. You got to communicate this stuff, right? So here's the thing. This is what a hiring manager really wants to hire: somebody who's done it before, who's super low risk. I'm going to hire them to here, and they're going to be a hero in the future going forward, right? I mean, this is what they want, but it's pretty unrealistic. It's pretty ideal, and it really doesn't happen all that often. Most people's background is a little bit more like this. It's a little bit more chaotic. It's a little bit unplanned. So that's a much riskier situation for somebody to make a decision to hire you. And so this is what we talked about before, which is, if you can show how the past that you had aligns with where you're going in the future, it will look a lot more like it's planned and managed. It'll reduce risk for somebody, and they're a lot more likely to hire you and give you the opportunity to achieve what your goals are. So planned advancement to achieve career goals is not job hopping. And the reason I want to bring that up is some people, when they're in career transition, don't want to take a job that's too off the mark. But as an example, if somebody's transitioning in IT, and the opportunity that you have in your immediate goal is to be able to pay your bills, and the opportunity you get is one to pull cable inside of buildings, go do that. Because I can show you people who took a job pulling cable, who then started working with the company that put in the racks, and then started working with the company that puts the servers in the racks, and then started working with the company that manages the servers. So sometimes planned advancement to achieve career. So now when somebody says, but why were you on that job only in 4 months? Well, it's the job that I took that I could pay my bills and was closest to computing that I could get at the time. I worked hard, I did those kinds of things, and then I made a move to this other organization within 4 months because that was going to help me achieve my career goals. So if you can explain even short moves in your career in terms of why you were doing it based upon your career goals, it'll really serve you well. So here's the thing: people hire people and people promote people. It's not your choice, it's other people's choices. So always build relationships, always build them internally, build them externally. And I'm not suggesting that you change who you are. I mean, some of you are introverted, some of you aren't. This is easier for some of you than it is to do. But the most introverted person builds relationships. And the relationship is about making sure that other people know, one, that you care, two, that you're there to support them, that you're doing everything you can to achieve success for your company and others in your organization. And those relationships give you the opportunity to communicate what your career goals are, because if you can align other people with helping you achieve your career goals, that's a big component to your keys to your career success. So there we go. So in all the years that I've been doing the work that I do, and all of the people that I see who get hired and who advance their careers, these are the keys that that I have seen over these years, which, if we went all the way back to the beginning, which is to have and set really clear career goals. to have a professional mindset, to become indispensable inside of your organization, to, execute an effective job search when it is time. The simple definition of executing an effective job search is go well beyond just applying for jobs, and your goal is to get more than one offer so you get to choose. When you start a job and, know what you're going to do in the first 90 days and stay on this rhythm of kind of these 90-day sprints of what it is you're going to do, what you're going to achieve, you can communicate that with your boss and your supervisors and your team. You'll become really interesting at that point in time. And then use these notions of career navigation in those quarterly reviews that you're doing to decide whether or not you need to, whether things are good, stay there, whether you need to make a lateral move inside or outside of the company, whether you need to advance your career, or whether it's time now to take a step back so that you can move forward again. And my hope is that through some of these sets of tools and notions that you got a couple of nuggets out of this stuff that will really help you advance your career. So, that kind of wraps up this kind of stuff. If anybody's got any questions or comments or anything, we got a little bit of time to do that.
Great, thanks so much, Gary. I'll give everyone a couple more minutes to type in their questions, but just a couple quick reminders that we at New Horizons, we're constantly trying to work with you to achieve your employment and objectives, and hope that you will reach out to your New Horizons career consultant for more information. Once again, if you do not currently have a career consultant, you can log onto our website at newhorizons.com and do a zip code search to find the center that's closest to you. Our webinar schedule is also up to date on our website. Gary mentioned a couple already. Resumes That Rock is coming up in November. So please visit newhorizons.com and click on the webinars link to see what our upcoming schedule is, and the registration links are there. You'll also find any archived recordings on that page as well, and you have access to over 50 of our past webinar recordings to view. Remember, these are all free to you, so please take advantage of the sessions where you can learn just the latest tips and tricks on our courses and products that we sell. Lastly, we'll be sending out our archive recording link to this presentation and the session later today for you to review and to pass on to anyone who may have missed the session. One question here for you, Gary, that came in. In today's economy, are the times between transitions more compressed? Do you see that they are more compressed? And are these career changes expected to happen more quickly?
Without question, yes. I mean, without question. So, both statistically and in my tiny sliver view of the world, career changes, job changes, those kinds of things are happening a lot more frequently than they are. In effective job search strategies, we actually talk about how to take advantage of that, because what's going on is that, and particularly in some career professions, like IT is one of them, that moves pretty quickly and things change pretty quickly. And in Austin, Texas, in infrastructure roles, I think that median time for somebody to be in a job is approaching, 2.5 years. Now, some people are 15, 20, right? But some people are 6 months. So it's approaching 2.5 years. So what that means is that all of the people who are in IT admin type roles, on the average, are changing jobs every 2.5 years. So now what happens is 2.5 years is what, 24, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 30 months is what that is. And so if you figure that, in 30 months, that means that if you knew how many IT administrators there were in your area, you can figure that on average that 30% of them, or a third of them at least, are going to be changing jobs this year. More than that, about 40% are changing jobs this year. And if you divide that by 12, you've got 4% or so, 3 to 4% every single month. Normally a job search goes on for 2 or 3 months. So what's happening is that at any given time, the hiring managers know well in advance of when a job is quote unquote open that they're going to need to hire. So that means that, probably 15, maybe even as many as 20% of all hiring managers at any given time know that they're going to need to make a hire and will actively engage in a conversation with you. So yeah, job change is really frequent. This notion of being hired happens more frequently than ever. And that really gives you a leg up if you understand that, because now when you're reaching out to people, that statistically that, 20, 25% of the people you're going to reach out to who are hiring managers are considering bringing somebody into the organization within the next few months. So yeah, it's absolutely true.
Great. Another question is, would you consider taking a 1099 contract employment with a company versus a permanent employee?
Sure. I mean, absolutely. I think it comes down to this. If you understand what your career goals are, then you pick the one that, that better helps you achieve your goals. So if you had both opportunities, so the thing about 1099 contract versus W-2 opportunity, the only thing that is, people read into it way more than it really is. The only thing it is defining who pays your employment tax. That's all it is. So on W-2 employment, your employer pays half of your employment tax. On 1099, you pay all of it. So as the federal government goes, that's all that there is to it. Sometimes there's this notion that contracts come to an end, but you can become indispensable. So it's really about which one's going to help you achieve your goals. Now, if you don't have both opportunities and you're only looking at a contract opportunity, yeah, take it every single day. Because as long as it's helping you move you toward your career goals, I mean, taking a contract way over here that's not relevant will make people wonder why the hell you did that. But if your career goal is to pay your bills, right? Maybe you did that. But yeah, I would never wait in lieu of taking a contract. The other thing that is different about contracts is it's not all that inappropriate to leave a contract job because they can let you go. That's kind of the deal. So take the contract job, continue to look for the job that you really want, and leave the contract job when you get it. So yeah, I would always take a contract job over not taking one at all, as long as it aligns with my career goals.
And another question that came in is, using all the tactics and the strategies and the things that you presented throughout the session, could this approach be used if you are working internationally, or would this not apply at all?
I would think, I mean, I haven't done that much work internationally, so I'm speaking without firsthand knowledge, but I would imagine that people are kind of the same all over the world, in that when I'm hiring, I'm looking for somebody who's an achiever. I'm looking for somebody who I'm going to like people who are achievers. I'm going to be interested in people who are clear about where it is they're going and have the ambition to do it. People who will support the team to be successful and all those kinds of things. I think that's probably a universal truth. You will run into some people sometime who are a little bit threatened and they don't want to hire people who are better than them and the rest. They're going to be a bad boss anyway. But I think this stuff is probably fairly universal, but I can't say for sure out of firsthand experience.
Great. Those are all the questions that we have today, Gary. Thank you again for presenting on this topic. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. This will conclude today's webinar, and that's a wrap. You may now log off. Thank you again. Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.